started now. As has already been said, my name is Fred Edwards. I'm the National Director of the United Coalition of Reason. I spent 15 years as Executive Director of the American Humanist Association, another 12 years as editor of the Humanist magazine. I got my start with the Humanist Association of San Diego, a local group where I grew up. So I've worked on the local level, I've worked on the national level, and on the national level I've helped local groups grow. And what I do now with the United Coalition of Reason is I organize local groups into local coalitions to get them working together to be more effective. And one of the things that the United Coalition of Reason, or United CORE for short, does is that it also trains local group activists in how to be more effective in organizing their groups, making their groups grow, getting publicity, how to talk to the media without making a fool of yourself, and things like that. So there is a lot of professional knowledge that has been built up in this movement, and that lore can be passed on to you, local activists, so that you can be more effective. The knowledge is out there, the information is out there. And there are many organizations like the Secular Student Alliance and the American Humanist Association and the Center for Inquiry that have manuals and training programs and so on to help local groups become more effective and to help them grow. We need to pass that lore on. There are people like me who have been professionally doing it. I've been doing this for 35 years, 30 of it professionally, paid professional. In other words, I had a middle-class income and I built a family and owned my own home doing humanism professionally. All right, and now the movement has grown so large that there are more job openings so that more people can have careers in atheism, freethought, humanism like I did. And that's a good thing. And we want to have more and more paid professionals. And we want to strengthen our group. And we want to become a powerful and effective movement. And that means that the professional knowledge that the professionals have acquired needs to be passed on to you, the local activists. So that's what I'm here to do, a little piece of it. Now, the structure of this seminar is that I'm going to be here until about 4:30, and there's going to be a break in the middle. Now, the first part of what I'm going to talk about is going to be things that will interest more of you than anyone else. That is, there will be material for all of you that will pick up from where that panel we just had, that great panel, left off. I'll pick up from that and I'll move forward with it. Then after the break, we'll get into some more technical details that will be of greater interest to activists and local leaders. That doesn't mean the rest of you should leave, but you can. If you got to get home, if you got to start the drive home, or whatever, or if you have had a long day and you're getting sleepy or whatever, and then you're not a local group leader and aren't going to use this information, then it's all right. You're not going to hurt my feelings. So therefore, it is okay after the break, only after the break, to pop out and leave. All right? So that's the way I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it as interactive as I can and as the time will allow. And I hope you will take notes, because I'm going to be giving you intense training, information, and material that you can take home and start to use. All right. First of all, let's start from where we are right now as a movement. Now, we've heard some allusions made to that in the video that we saw. We've heard a number of numbers being thrown out in figures. I'd like to throw out one for you that's been supported by the Harris, Pew, Barna, and Gallup polls and surveys, and that is that about 15% of Americans right now are non-theistic in one sense or another. They're atheists, they're agnostic, they're agnostic, which I'll explain briefly a little later, or they're apatheist. In other words, they don't care about the God question, so they're apatheist. But the point is that that's 15%. Now, not all of them are identifying as atheists or outside the church. A lot of non-believers go to church because their families go to church. All right? And they go to church for other reasons, for social reasons, or to engage in charitable activities, or it's the only show in town for teaching moral education to their children, and they don't know about us, and they don't know about the movement, or they're not quite ready to give it up yet. Whatever it is, 15% of Americans scattered all over, are folks like us in one way or another. But they're not all in our movement. Why is that? That's something that we're going to try to address. Why is it that those millions of Americans aren't bolstering our movement and making us powerful? Because you see, we collectively, folks like us, not folks in the movement, but folks like us generally, outnumber all the minority religions combined. Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, Mormons. Combine all those groups together, combine their numbers. We, meaning folks who think like us, privately or publicly, we outnumber all of them combined. But there's a Jewish lobby, there's a Mormon lobby, there's evangelical Christians, there's all of these other groups, there's a Hindu expat community, there's all kinds of strong groupings and political interest groups. Muslims are organized and so on. We're not organized. Now, we're organized in this room, we're organized in our local groups, we're organized in certain national organizations. But the rank and file of us, most of the people who are like us out there, don't even know about our movement, aren't organized, not involved. Just think what we could do if we could organize the people who already think the way we do. If we could just say to those millions of Americans, that 15%, hey, we're over here, and this is all of the neat stuff we do. So come on and join us and become part of it. If we could just do that, if we could just mobilize even a percentage, a significant percentage, 10% of our market even, would make us powerful. If there were a humanist lobby, an atheist lobby, a freethinker lobby, or whatever kind of lobby you want to call it, if we could get organized in a way that would give us power and significance, we could make a big difference. We could start calling the shots. You don't have to be in the majority to run the country. You just have to be organized. Because, in fact, the majority does not run the country and never has. Okay? It's always a minority of people who get the power. It's always a minority of people who are organized. It's always a minority of people who make the difference because they're the ones who are the political leaders. So let's get organized and let's get in a leadership position so that we can set the standards, so that we can set the agenda, so that people will listen to us, and so that we can speak freely without being discriminated against at work, and at home, and in our families, and culturally, and so on. That we're tired of being second-class citizens, so now we're going to get organized, we're going to take leadership, and we're going to be first-class citizens, just like folks like us are in Europe. After the end of World War II, humanists and atheists and freethinkers got organized. There had been a Freethought movement in Europe that had been pretty powerful, significant over the years before World War II. Hitler not only imprisoned Jews and Gypsies, he imprisoned freethinkers. And freethinkers had to shut up or they would end up in the camps. So we are part of that history. All right, well, after World War II, the freethinkers got organized, primarily under the name humanists. And they got organized in many countries. And that changed the whole face of Europe. All right, well, we in the United States are a little bit behind Europe in that development. Because, you see, we weren't in this continent as burned by traditional religion as Europeans were. They'd had all of these religious wars, they'd had all of these problems, and witch burnings and everything else. And they had inquisitions, and there was more than just the Spanish Inquisition. Don't let anyone tell you that the Inquisition was just that little thing going on in Spain. All right? It was all over Europe. There was the Papal Inquisition in which 1 million people died. All right? So Europe was burned badly by religion. And they finally got sick of it. And World War II helped convince them that there were these kinds of problems and that they had to be addressed. And so now, being a freethinker or an atheist or a humanist in Europe is no big deal. And it's not even that big of a deal in Canada, because Canada is sort of more European in their thinking. But here in the United States, because we weren't burned by those kinds of big-time religious wars, and because we made a big business of religion, then because of that, we have it longer. Now, my British friends like to say, well, you know, it's really your separation of church and state that's the problem, because then you keep religion out of government, there's no state religion, and so instead of the religions being lazy, like they are in England, and benefiting from the state religion and the government largesse, because you have separation of church and state, religions have had to fight tooth and nail for their position, and they've gotten very good at it. And I said, well, that may be part of the problem, but there's another part you're overlooking. You sent us all your religious refugees. You dumped all your refugees on us. And you sent all your criminals to Australia. And they got the better deal. All right. Now, we've seen things happening in this country. We have seen the demographic change. Our numbers grow over the years, and the pollsters have noticed it. And in 2004, something really important happened. Sam Harris published the book, The End of Faith, and that was the first time an out-and-out atheist book was being published by a major mainstream publisher. That was a watershed moment. That was the year the dam broke. That was the year things started happening. That was the year that the term began to be coined, the new atheism. And that was when all of this stuff started to happen. And then it started to be more and more okay, to the point where there were some newspapers in Britain and elsewhere saying, atheism is suddenly hip now. Isn't that interesting? As has already been mentioned, we're hip. Now, I've been in this movement a long time, so I know back in the late 1960s, when I first got involved, and when I first called myself an atheist then, there was one thing I noticed, that there were those vanity publishing houses, those publishers who will take your money if you publish a book with them, that they'll publish any book for money. They wouldn't publish atheist books. Even if you paid to have your book published, they wouldn't publish an atheist book in the late 1960s. But that all changed. That has changed so dramatically that you can find atheist books in airport bookstores. The most mainstream of the mainstream, because they don't want to offend anybody, our books are there. So this has been a sea change, and I have seen it all. I have witnessed it happen, and it's amazing. You are part of this sea change. And all of these different organizations have had a dramatic rise in their membership, particularly in 2006, when Richard Dawkins published The God Delusion, and the new atheism was on everybody's lips, it seemed. That was when most of the organizations experienced their sudden growth, to the point where now today, the Freedom from Religion Foundation almost has 20,000 members, a figure that was thought unthinkable 10 years ago. And the American Humanist Association reports that all of their internet friends add up to 35,000 people. 35,000 people regularly tuning in on activities and observing things, and these aren't just hits on a website. These are active, involved people. 35,000 countable people are involved in this electronically, because the internet has been the great equalizer. You know, it was once said by someone, and I forget who, that we'll have freedom of the press in this country when everyone can afford their own printing press. All right, because you see, getting a book published was a hard thing to do, and the churches had the advantage because they were well established and so on. But the internet has been the great equalizer. It has made it possible now for everyone to have a website. It's made it possible for everyone to have a voice, and it has made it possible for us to be heard and seen and noticed, and it has made it possible for dialogue to occur between opposing websites, and people have started to notice us. That we have come of age and emerged because the internet opened it up to where people could find us, often by accident. People don't even know we exist very often, and they're looking for something about God, and what do you know, an atheist website comes up, and they go, what? You mean there are people who don't believe in God? Boy, I gotta see what this is about. And we began to be discovered. So, because it is so cheap and easy for people to tweet and retweet and have Facebook pages and do all of these things on the internet, we now have a real shot at being heard, and the playing field has begun to level a little more. And this has resulted in a dramatic change in our demographics. I remember when I turned 45, I'm 64 now, but when I turned 45, I was executive director of the AHA, and one of my employees said, "Congratulations, Fred, you are now half the age of the average humanist," which would be 90, okay? In other words, we were a movement that was kind of perceived as angry old men meeting around a library table. All right, and this was the image that we had, that we were, I used to joke that I'm in the business, I'm professionally paid, and I'm in the business of selling a product that nobody wants. That this was sort of the way it felt. But the demographic has changed now. More women have become active. It used to be that only 1 in 4 humanists were women. And now we're seeing much more balance on the boards of directors of organizations and so on. And that we're having more and more young people becoming involved. That's what the new atheism has done, is brought more young people into the movement and more ethnic diversity. And so at the Reason Rally, at the end of March, when you had 25,000 plus people gathered on the National Mall in the rain to participate in that, I looked at that crowd. And I had never seen such great diversity in age, in ethnicity, in lifestyle, and so on. That's the demographic we wanted all this time. And we have seen the movement change. We have seen the movement change in terms of not only that there are more organizations, nationally and locally, than ever before, promoting our ideas, but there is a greater diversity of organizations. It used to be all of the groups were just having lecture discussion meetings. You know, you go to a monthly lecture, and then you talk about it, and then you go home. And that was what was going on. Or there were the ethical culture societies that would build a kind of community, a church-like community. And there were the humanistic Unitarian Universalist churches, and there were the humanistic Jewish groups. And they were doing the community thing, and other groups were doing the lecture discussion thing. And that was about the limit of your choices. Today we have charitable groups, we have parenting groups, we have support groups for people recovering from religion, we have singles groups, we have atheist drinking buddies, okay? I mean, you know, that's what all the meetups are about. You know, you can meet at a bar and chit-chat. Why the hell not? You don't have to be an activist. You don't have to be out there and hustle. I know P.C. Myers said, you know, if you're not in the fight and you're not out there practically offending people, we don't need you in the movement. But you know what? Atheist drinking buddies is a growing, burgeoning demographic. And you know, we can draw from those people. You know, after they put down their glass and they're having a few thoughts, you know, they're not much use when they're in their cups. But a little bit later, you know, you can get them organized. You can talk to them about things, and then they might join another group and get more involved and so on. So it's all good. All of these groups are good, whether they're actively doing something or not. The point is, whether it's a little philosophical meeting, or it's a book club, or it's a movie club, or it's an art group, or whatever, you're going on excursions together, you're having sex together, whatever it is, it's all good. And by the way, I've spoken at the Lifestyles Convention in Las Vegas, so if you know what that's about. Okay, these are swingers, okay? I've talked to swingers about atheism, all right? And you'd be surprised how many swingers are actually religious, and they have a problem with it. And so they have a problem with the fact that they're religious, but they're being criticized. So they love to find out ways in which they can find biblical justification for the stuff they want to do anyway. And it's amazing to watch some of the sessions that they attend about, oh yes, the early Christians, they were swingers. You know, I actually attended a session at the Lifestyle Convention on that. But the point is that we can make the point to the swingers, hey, you really should be us. You know, you should really hang out. Because back in the 80s, humanists in particular, humanist was the operative word rather than atheist back then, and the humanists were accused, the secular humanists were accused of, you know, advocating free sex and free love and just unbridled enjoyment of life. And I thought, wow, you know, if enough people believe that, we're going to really grow. So anyway, we have quite a variety of organizations in our movement. And, as I mentioned, a dramatic growth in the number of local groups. And dramatic diversification in locals groups. Singles, parenting, social, political, charitable, campus, community, educational, all kinds of different groups. And the campus groups have really been expanding. and now even into high schools, which is just such a great thing, that we've been getting organized into high schools as well as into colleges. And so this development, this growth of local groups was such a powerful development that we were observing as a result, as a direct result of the new atheism, that the United Coalition of Reason was formed. Because you see, all of these groups are being formed by people new to the movement, who didn't have any history of the movement, all these new groups. And someone would say, you know, I think I'll do something that nobody's ever done before. I think I'll start an atheist club. They had no idea that there were other groups out there. Or if they knew there were other groups out there, they weren't talking to them. And sometimes I still get calls from people who say, are there any atheist groups in my community? Well, I just sit there on my keyboard and I Google atheists in and the name of their city. All the groups pop up, and then I start rattling them off, and they think how smart I am. You know, so the point is that there is this growth in number and type of local groups. So the United Coalition of Reason was formed to get these groups cooperating with each other, talking to each other, sharing information, talking shop together, and working together to raise their public profile so more people would know that these groups exist and that there's a choice. Because think about it. A person might join a local group, and it's not really right for them. Maybe they want a good old-fashioned religion bashing, and they end up in a ethical culture group that's sort of churchy. Or someone else wants community, and they end up in a lecture discussion group. And they're not happy. And they think, well, if that's what the movement is, I'm out of here. But by knowing the whole variety of groups in your local area and the choices you have, and by creating a website, a local coalition website, that is one-stop shopping so that you can find out where all of the groups are, that's a boon. That's great. So we began going around the country launching billboard campaigns. We would pay for the billboards, or we would pay for the bus ads, and we would raise the public profile of all the groups that were listed on the webpage and direct everyone to the website, omahacore.org in this case. And they go to that website, and you can see all of the groups that are listed, that are part of Omaha Core. They're listed on the website just as they are in their brochure that you've probably seen. All right, so that's the way we do it. And that's the way we move more of the general public to first know that we exist, and second, find the group that's right for them. That way they're happy. And also the leaders of the groups are happy, because they don't get those people in there who don't fit. The last thing you need is a troublesome member, all right? And very often the troublesome members are the ones who want to convert the group into something that the group is not. So you join P.Z. Meyer's group and you want to be, an accommodationist, you're not going to feel very welcome. Or you're going to try to change the nature of the group. Better to join the local accommodationist group, okay? So you've got the non-accommodationist group and the accommodationist group and the group that builds community and the group that's just drinking buddies and the group that goes to movies and the parenting group, and you've got all of these choices. You join the group that's right for you. All right, so that's the concept at work here, and that was the reason behind the United Coalition of Reason. And so what I have here is some literature here that just explains what the United Coalition of Reason does and shows what our network is right now, all of the different coalitions we have. We have right now 56 coalitions around the country and are building more each day. So there were certain people who are going to pass these things out for me. So while I'm talking, I'm going to have those things passed out. So you understand what that part of it is about as I move on to the next thing. All right. Now, given all of this dramatic change, there are some questions you should be asking yourself. Have you experienced growth? In the light of all of this dramatic growth in our movement, has your group experienced growth? Or maybe the very existence of your group is a product of this change. These are things to think about. Is the nature and variety of these groups, the growth and variety, are you part of that change? Also, are you independent, or is your group a member of or associated with or affiliated with one or more parent organizations? one or more national organizations. Because there are a lot of national organizations out there that will provide you with services, with information, with manuals, with free literature, with free magazines, and so on. So you may want your group to be fiercely independent, or you may want your group to associate with a parent organization, like the American Humanist Association, the Center for Inquiry, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, American Atheists, and I could go on and on, the Secular Student Alliance, and so on. So, these are thoughts that you should be thinking to yourself on these matters. Now, there are reasons why, when we look at all of these millions of folks like us out there, millions of Americans who don't believe in God, millions of godless Americans, some of them in church, most of them not, why aren't they joining your group? Well, a lot of people think, well, you know, they ought to join our group because they think like we do. And gee, we want to get everybody together who thinks like us, so it's natural. Well, it's not natural. Because people don't join groups merely because the philosophy behind the group is agreeable to them. People join groups because of what the group does. So you've got to look at what your group does. If your group is all about lectures and discussions, you're not going to attract all atheists. You're only going to attract atheists who like lectures and discussions. If your group is about conviviality and socializing and so on, you're going to attract people who want that. If your group is about parenting, you're going to attract people who want to discuss parenting from our perspective. If your group is a philosophical discussion group, you're not going to attract all people who agree with us, because not everybody who agrees with us wants to talk philosophy. I performed a little experiment in a rodeo. I'm not a great fan of rodeos, but I was at this rodeo. And rodeos all begin with the cowboy's prayer, if you're familiar with any of them. All right, now you want to know how to spot the atheists at a rodeo? Look at the people waiting outside the stands until the prayer is over before they come in. Look at all the people not bowing their heads, because you're not going to bow your head, right? So look around and see who else is not bowing their head. People who don't believe in God go to rodeos. They don't all go to philosophical meetings. They don't all go to lectures. They don't all listen to science. They're not all into science. Some of them are into the arts. Some of them are just into sports. Whatever. The point is, that's why people may not join your group. There's more than just ideology involved here. It's what you do. So ask yourself, what does your group do? And then reach out to those people who are interested in doing the same thing, because that's your market. Nobody has a market of 100% of the people. No one even has a market of 100% of the atheists. Your market is defined by the nature of what your group does. So ask yourself, what does our group do? What do we want to do? And then, who is the audience among our subset of the population called the godless? What is our audience among them, and where do we find them? And then people need to know that you exist. And this is where the firebrands come in very conveniently and have an important role to play in our movement. You've heard the old joke about, how do you get the ass to listen? First you hit it in the real hard to get its attention. Well, that's what the firebrands do. They get attention. People wake up. Oh, you mean these people exist? You mean there are people who don't believe in God? You mean there are groups that I can join? That's one of the great things that Richard Dawkins did with the God Delusion. Not only did he publish a book by a major publisher in which he called religion a delusion, but he listed at the back of his book all of the major organizations in the movement so that people would know where they could go to join. That was the greatest boon to Camp West and to many of the other organizations in our movement. Because you see, that's what's important. First you have to get their attention. You have to shock them into awareness that we even exist. And then once they know you exist, you tell them where to find us, where to go, and all of the interesting and fun things that we do, and the different kinds of groups that we have. And then when people find your group, they need to find your group welcoming. They can't walk into the room and find that, in fact, you're all a bunch of unfriendly, unpleasant, dour, hostile people who only want to talk to their own friends and don't want to welcome new people. So you need to then make your group evocative, welcoming, and a comfortable place to land for total strangers. Because people walk into a room and they want to feel welcome. They want to feel they belong there. They don't want to feel like outsiders. They already feel like outsiders in this country. They already feel like second-class citizens. Don't make them feel second-class when they come to your group. Make them feel first-class for showing up. All right. Those are my main points on that. Now, this is where we get into the direction of your group. And I'm going to talk about various styles of groups, the tribal nature of groups. This is a point that P.Z. Myers made, that we're forming our own tribe, and identifying your mission. This is critical. All right. There are different types of groups, as I've indicated. So now let me label the different types of groups. There are solitary groups and activist groups. So not everybody is ready to be out. Now in my work with the United Coalition of Reason, my job is to out groups. That is to let groups be known to the public. My job is not to out individuals. Okay, so some groups, they protect the identities of their members. They say, look, you can come here and it's a safe place. You don't have to tell anyone you're an atheist. It's all right. We're not going to call you a coward for not telling the world you're an atheist, because maybe you're not ready to lose your job today. Maybe you're not ready to have your family turn on you today. Maybe you're really not into that, and maybe you don't want, to take that hard route. Now, some people have had to take a really hard route and to lose jobs and to suffer greatly. And these are the heroes among us. Martin Luther King was a hero. He went and he advocated civil rights. A little old lady approached him at one of his speaking sessions and stabbed a letter opener into his chest, and he was hauled off to the hospital, and if he had a cough, he would have died on the spot. It would have pierced his heart. At that point, most people would say, okay, civil rights, yeah, it's a good cause, but I'm out of here. All right, Martin Luther King stayed with him. That's why he's a hero, because he's not like most people. That's why we have heroes here, because they're not like most people. Because most people won't do that. And most people won't give up their job. And in fact, you hear about all of those Christians who were thrown to the lions. Very few Christians were thrown to the lions, and very few Christians were willing to be. All you had to do was say, yes, I believe that the emperor is God, and I believe in the pantheon of God. That's all you had to say, and they didn't throw you to the lions. And so many Christians back then said that very thing. Whatever, okay, yeah, the emperor's God, whatever. Get me out of here. I don't want to die in the arena. All right? Not too many people are willing to die in the arena. And we should not expect that of everyone who comes to our meetings. We should protect their identity. One of the things I like to say is, I do this professionally. Okay? I make my living being out. No one's going to fire me for being a godless, secular human. All right? They might fire you. So let me speak for you until you are ready to speak. So our groups should be willing to protect people until they are ready to come out. And some of them may never be ready. All right, so you can be solitary or you can be activist. And a lot of people want to be activists. They want to be out there and they want to be well known for their activism. Good. Give them plenty of opportunity to do so. All right, is your group theoretical or experiential? Some people just want to engage in philosophical conversations, discuss the fine points of these things. Should you be an atheist? Should you be an agnostic? Should you be a humanist? Can you be all of them? What does it mean to not believe in God? Is the God idea even coherent enough to where it's even true or false to say that God exists or not? There's all of these interesting questions that you can discuss philosophically. You can have a theoretical oriented group. Or you can have an experiential group, in which groups do things. They have experiences. They go out. They work together. They're activists or what have you. Is your group lecture discussion? Is it social? Is it community? Are you building a community? Are you building an intentional community that meets weekly? Are you project-oriented? You go out and do charitable projects, or you go out and picket the courthouse, or you go out and clean a highway in the name of your group? Or are you activity outing oriented? Do you go to movies together? Do you go to art exhibits together? Do you go to the beach together? Do you go on hikes together? These are other kinds of things. Is your group aggressive, or is it open-ended? That is, by aggressive I mean, is it mission or purpose driven, or is it tolerant, accepting, and input driven? You can have either of those choices. They're all valid choices. And that also means something else. Yeah, you have a thought.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was okay to ask. But
yeah, I did.
I'm hearing the word "or." Our group tends to be multi.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, though, can you be too multi? I mean, we have social, we have discussion, book discussions, we do projects, we're activists, and that kind of thing.
I will come to that. That's a good question. Okay. So, but it's important then to respect all the styles of all of the different groups, because we're all in this movement together. Different people have different needs, so you want to make all kinds of people feel welcome, and you want to respect all of the other groups in the movement, even if that isn't what you want to do. In other words, if you think, well, you know, it's really important to be clear about your atheism, it's really important to be out there about it, that's what your group should do. And you should do it with vigor. But that doesn't mean you need to trash the other groups that are doing something different, or for a different reason. And also, don't let labels divide you within your group. So many people argue endlessly. And I've been in this movement so long, I have heard all of the arguments. Are we atheists? Are we agnostics? Are we freethinkers, rational, secular, skeptics, humanists? And are we religious humanists, or are we secular humanists? Oh, man. And I'm telling you, after 35 years of hearing those arguments, I can tell you they have never been resolved, and that people still take all of those positions. That some of them are on the ascendant at some times, and right now atheist is on the ascendant. There was a time when humanist was on the ascendant. There was a time when scientific agnostic was the ascendant term. And Thomas Henry Huxley and Bertrand Russell were identified with that label. There were times when freethinker was in the ascendant. And then you had Robert P. Ingersoll, who had that label, and so on. We respect our allies because we have a model that we can follow in the gay rights movement. The gay rights movement was successful despite the tremendous amount of diversity and argumentation within their own ranks. Because you have a range of groups within the gay rights movement, you still do. You had ACT UP, which was in the business of outing gay people, which was in the business of being very outlandish in any way they could, sparking all kinds of controversy, getting all sorts of media attention, and many people said ACT UP was an embarrassment to the gay rights movement, but they weren't really. They were necessary to get attention. Hey, we're here. Whap it on the rear and get some attention. So then other people complained about log cabin Republicans. Oh, come on, you know, you're being wussy. You're trying to be loved by the right wing, and they're never going to love you. What fools you are. The log cabin Republicans won a Supreme Court victory that strongly supported gay rights, and many gay rights groups later came around and showed some respect for log cabin Republicans. And so on, and all of the groups in between. The gay rights movement is a perfect example of how all sorts of groups involved in one movement, and people who disagree with each other vehemently, can work together because they're all moving in the same direction. And this is one of the points that Greta Christina mentioned, that we're all in this together. We're each doing our separate things. Let's not get in each other's way. Let's not bash each other for our particular choice of style. But by the same token, we're all in this together. We're all moving in the same direction. I like to put it, every Gandhi needs his Nehru. Gandhi was this radical on the outside, doing all sorts of crazy things with nonviolent resistance and so on. And Nehru was in the government, working behind the scenes to make it all stick, and became the first president of India. And Nehru, by the way, was a humanist and identified as a human. He was part of the important secular wing, and in fact, it is even in the Indian Constitution, because of him, that it is the job of the Indian government to promote humanism and scientific inquiry. It's in the Constitution. So even though it's a Hindu-dominated country that was divided into two countries, Pakistan and India, over religious differences. So that just shows you that secularists are at work everywhere. All right, so we can make progress with both critical and mainstream groups challenging the status quo or doing the interfaith thing, social or political. Now, in this regard, let's look at how we are like tribes. Our groups are in many ways like tribes because, first of all, we want to have an identity. We carry a label, we carry an identity, we say, this is who we are. I am defining myself by my non-theistic view or my positive humanist view or however we want to define ourselves, but we're picking a definition and a group to go with that definition. So that is a tribal behavior, having an identity. Now there are lots of people out there who don't believe in God, but who will say, I just wear my atheism like the shine on my shoes. I don't even think about it, and I sure as heck wouldn't get together with other atheists just to talk about atheism. I have other things I want to do. All right, so we're the tribal ones, we're the ones who pick an identity. Part of the reason we do that is because we're aware that we're oppressed by the outside world. We're aware also that there are people in this country who, motivated by traditional religious ideas, are screwing up the country, and we want to do something about that. So we feel oppressed by the outside world. We also have our own internal jargon. Many times you've been in this movement long enough, you start talking like an atheist, and you don't realize you're talking like an atheist, so then you start talking to other people and you wonder why they don't understand you, because we do develop our own internal jargon. Case in point, Herb Silverman, president of the Secular Coalition for America. I was with him at a gathering where we were all eating at one of these buffet restaurants. And he had, as he typically does, he had on one of his slogan t-shirts that he's famous for. And he was walking around in that restaurant, and some stranger in the restaurant says, well, I see you're in the insurance business. Herb Silverman is a professor of mathematics. So he asked, what made you think I was in the insurance business? And he said, because of the slogan on your t-shirt. The slogan on his t-shirt was, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. All right, so you see, we talk to each other, we understand each other, we know what that means. But they were thinking insurance claim. So we have to try to be aware when we are not communicating. And we have unique observances. We celebrate Darwin Day, which has become a global phenomenon. Many of us celebrate Earth Day, the National Day of Reason, which is held each year on the National Day of Prayer, World Humanist Day, which is the summer solstice, Banned Books Week, National Secular Service Day in October, and Human Life and Festivus. So these are the things that make us very much like tribes, because we have our unique observances. Now I'm going to cover more of this, but I want to now give you that chance to take a break. But when I come back, I'm going to talk to you about specifically what you can do to make your groups grow, make your meetings more effective, make your groups more cohesive, and how to publicize your groups to the larger world. So take a 10-minute break, and come back here, and I'm going to give you a lot of specifics that you can use and take home.
That one is the only one that has a sound. Story about how he ran down the mountain. I hear these gunshots. He fired 3 times at the spectre.
Okay, we're going to get started again. So take your seat. Resume. Okay, so here we get into specifics. All right, first thing you need to know about your group is that size matters.
Right.
When a group grows beyond 50 to 100 active members, it needs to reorganize into a program organization where smaller subgroups are generated, and thus they serve different needs. So when you get to the 50 to 100 member mark, you need to start thinking about things like a book or a movie club, lectures and social activities, both, parenting, political activism, and so on. Furthermore, tribes are never larger than 150 people. There's a group, in fact, in America, and it has a long history, called the Hutterites. And when they would get to a certain size in their enclosed community, they're kind of like the old order Amish, the old order Mennonites or the Amish. When they would get to a certain size, then the whole community, kind of like a beehive, the whole community would pack up and get ready to move. And then by lot, they would decide which families would move and set up a new Hutterite community and which ones would stay behind. It was done by lot, so everyone had to get ready to move. So that's one of the ways that tribes work. So you have to understand how, when you get to a size larger than 150 people, you need to find ways to branch out. Because you don't want to necessarily split off like a beehive does, and you got a competing queen or whatever, and you need to swarm and go off and form a new hive. What instead you want to do is diversify your group. And this is the secret behind the mega churches. The mega churches aren't just really big churches. They're churches that are organized around all sorts of little subgroups and all sorts of little clubs. And those churches are using their facilities almost every day of the week and multiple hours during the day. That they're not just using those facilities on Sunday. They're having all sorts of sub-meetings and adult Sunday schools and discussion groups and yoga groups and exercise groups and art and literature groups and so on. And then it all feeds into the big central meeting that they hold on Sunday morning that not everybody comes to, but enough people come to that they can fill a large hall. But you see, you can't really have a tight-knit community that is that large. So you build community by creating subgroups out of the large group. So megachurches tribalize and have activity throughout the week. And involve a number of these different styles that I was talking to you about earlier. And thus active groups in our movement have done likewise. There have been local chapters of the American Humanist Association, for example, that would have a whole calendar of activities all month long. They go out whale watching, then another group would go to movies and then discuss the film afterwards. Another group set up a book club. You know, they'd have a book club. They do all sorts of things. And so you could be part of one or more of these. And then there'd be the main central meeting of the month and so on. So you can do that depending on the size of the group and if you're organized appropriately around it. Now, As I noted earlier, groups are defined by what they do. So you need to decide what your central activity is. You may have a number of these peripheral activities, but what is the main focus? Well, that's where you come up with a mission or purpose of the group, an overriding reason for the group's existence. You need to come up with a mission statement, something that clarifies why you exist and what you're there to do. That will keep you focused, because then you know when you're getting off message. If you don't know what your message is, you won't know when you're off message. You won't know when you're distracted. You won't know when someone's coming in and raising something that isn't what you're really about. You need to be able to say, that isn't something we do. This is what we do. You need to specialize in some way by having a clear mission and purpose so that you don't get too scattered. And you can have primary and subordinate missions. Or you can have your subgroups feed into the central mission, but there can be some necessary tie-in that you work out. And of course, as your group grows, if you find it necessary, you can rewrite your mission statement. It isn't set in stone. It isn't there for all time. God didn't write it. One thing you should try to avoid doing is philosophical definitions. Avoid writing a definition statement in your bylaws. So many times I have seen groups break up over, okay, humanism is this, and it includes these things, and they fight over that definition, and next thing you know, they don't have a group anymore. Or they fight over the definition of atheism, or what Freethought means. Instead, use the words. You can put the words in your bylaws. We're this, or we're that. Leave them undefined. Because if you fight over the definitions, if you try to play like you're a writer of a dictionary or something, that is getting too trivial, and it can get divisive. And divisive over nothing that needs to divide it. Now, after you have set a mission, a higher mission and subordinate missions, or shown how your subgroups relate to that mission, then you set measurable goals. And you set short-term goals and long-term goals. Measurable goals are things like, okay, this year we plan to do this. We plan to have this many new members by the end of the year. Or we plan to raise this much money, or whatever. You set achievable and measurable goals. Having a financial growth plan is important, because then you're treating your group like a business. Now, keep in mind, the traditional religions, the churches, they treat their operations in a business-like manner. Very often, volunteers don't do that for our kind of groups. They think they're above that, or they think we really shouldn't be thinking about money, or whatever. But if you want to be able to have paid leadership, or you ever want to be able to buy your own building, or anything like that, or if you want to do high-profile campaigns and put on events where you have to put up upfront money, like to rent a facility to hold a big meeting or conference, and you need money. And that means you need financial planning. And that means you need to think in business-like terms. So try to find people in your group who understand these things and can help you with a business plan. You may want, as one of your measurable goals, to launch a campaign or put on a big event that year. All right, so you think about this and you plan for it. And you don't just dream about it. You organize toward doing it, and you set sub-goals that lead to the goal, and then you actually carry them out. And you can set reasonable long-term goals. You can have a 5-year plan, which, by the way, you can modify each year when you find out which direction you're really going, because there are all sorts of things that may change your situation. You may, for example, just completely fail in your project, and you may have to lower your standard. Or something else can happen. Some really rich person can come along, and or maybe one of your wealthy members drops dead, and you find out you're in their will, and they leave you a bunch of money, and now you got to reset all your goals, because now you got to have a plan for spending this money. Although you don't have to spend it all right away, but you have to plan. You have to decide if you're going to put it in an endowment fund or what you're going to do. And then, therefore, it's good to have people who understand money. Now, if you are a homeowner or if you are a business person yourself, you know something about managing money. Bring that knowledge to the table for your group and help them out. All right, now a number of groups have various problems and pitfalls that they run into. There are mission problems, leadership problems, and management problems. And I'm going to quick run across a list of some of these to be thinking about. One of them is narrowness of style. I mentioned some of the styles, that you can be an insular group, or you can have a group that's outward and promoting, you can be political, or you can be social, and so on. Narrowness of style is appropriate if you are a small group and want to stay small. That's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're just a group of philosophical folks who gather in a home and you talk philosophy every month or something, and you never want to do more than that, then that's fine. But chances are, it might be better if you were a subgroup of a larger group, if that's all you're going to do. Because it can be a mission problem for any significant group that wants to go anywhere if its style if it only sticks to one of these styles and is therefore too narrow. Or if it just sticks to the lecture discussion model, which isn't going to attract a very wide range of people. The lecture discussion model is usually most appropriate for male suburban retirees. All right? That is the primary audience for the lecture discussion model. So you have to ask, is this the demographic I want to reach? Well, if it is, fine. But if you want to go beyond that, then you need to vary your meetings more. You can sometimes get in a rut. Some of the things that can get you into a rut are these kind of more atheist than thou discussions. That are you a good enough atheist? Are you a pure atheist? Or, are you a hard atheist or a soft atheist? Or are you agnostic? There are all kinds of these conversations that go on, and you could lose endless time discussing them. Now, that doesn't mean you might not have a place for people who want to discuss these things. They can have the philosophical group, and they can discuss it to beat the band. But if you want your group to go anywhere, that should not be a primary activity of your group. That should not be something that distracts you at every meeting. And I've been to local humanist meetings where it just seems that in meeting after meeting, they discuss what humanism means and what it means to be a humanist, and are you humanist enough, and shouldn't we be supporting this cause or that cause, and if you oppose this cause, or if you're not for animal rights, or if you're for animal experimentation in science or whatever, well then you're not a true humanist and I am, so it becomes more humanist than that. And I've seen that happen. Try to avoid over-focusing on definitions and categories. Secular humanist, religious humanist, atheist, agnostic, oh come on, we're all the same. We're all godless in one way or another, okay? So we can discuss it philosophically in philosophical gatherings, but the rest of the time, let it go. All right? Now, you may privately think that these others are cowards or fools. That's okay. But you can think whatever you want, and you might even be right. But don't disrupt the meeting over it. Don't drive people away on such petty concerns, because we're all in this together. And this boat floats or sinks together with all of us. We're in this boat, and there aren't that many of us. And very often when groups are small, they tend to get smaller by dividing over who's true blue. Now, what is the group that primarily has this problem? Millennialist groups. Groups that say the world is going to end. And boy, as the day approaches, they start fighting amongst themselves, and the group gets smaller and smaller. And then when the end doesn't come, they get smaller and smaller because they start kicking out the ones who aren't true blue enough. All right, we don't want to be like those people. Avoid constant negativity. That is, how bad everything in the world is. How bad, there are some things you can actually feel good about, and once in a while you can actually write a letter to the editor praising somebody who did something right in the world. It's all right. You don't have to always be, stop that, down with this, let's end that, let's punish these people. All right? Yes, those are important things to do. Don't get me wrong. There are lots of things wrong in the world, and we got to fix them. That isn't every damn meeting. That isn't every conversation. Okay? There are things that we can be positive about. All right, then we have leadership problems, where one person does all the work and then burns out and quits or leaves town, and then everybody's looking at each other, okay, what do we do now? The group disappears, or maybe it's the one person who was the only one who had access to the website and knew all of the passwords. And so I mean, you got a website floating out there in the middle of nowhere that you can't change or get rid of? Okay, don't dump it all on one person, and don't let one person take it all on. Some people are workaholics and will take it all on their shoulders, and other people are glad to give it to them. Don't do it. Make sure that more than one person has the keys to the kingdom. And make sure that everything isn't resting on one person, because that won't work. And if new people come in and they don't like that one person, well, you don't need megalomaniacs running your group. Try to avoid then concentrated leadership, where 90% of the work gets done by only 10% of the people. I mean, if you've got 10% of your people doing the work, that may be an improvement over having one person do all the work. But the goal should be to try to change those figures so that you have 80% of the people doing 20% of the work, or 70% of the people doing 30% of the work, or whatever. Spread it out a little bit. But one of the things that prevents that from happening is a lack of trust. People keep their cards close to their chest. They're jealous of their positions of power within this small group. They're a big fish in a little sea, and they don't want to give it up. We need to have more trust and build a sense of community on your board of directors. Don't have big fights on your board of directors where every time someone loses a vote on your board of directors, they go out and tell all the other members what's wrong with all of the other board members. You want to build a community on that board, where people, unless something is really outrageous going wrong on that board, people will keep the confidence of the board discussions so that you build a sense of community and a sense of consensus. All right, some of the membership problems you might face. Demographic imbalance due to meeting or leadership styles. Very often when a group has the lecture discussion model that tends to attract old white men predominantly, there's a certain way that old white men like to intellectualize. It really doesn't fit what young women of color like to do. And so, therefore, you need to realize that different people talk about issues differently. They have different discussion styles. That very often, and this is a stereotype, but it isn't, but stereotypes often have a basis in some fact, that very often women want to build community and cooperation on the board, and oftentimes men want to be more adversarial in their discussions. I win, you lose. And very often women in the group want to say, we win together. Now, there are times when you need each of those styles, and they play a role, but you need both of them. So you need gender balance on your board, and you need a balance of age and, if you can get it, ethnicity. You need to have succession planning. Many groups don't plan for their next leadership or their next election. They think, oh, we're going to have these same leaders meeting after meeting, and they make no plans for the future, and then they get caught flat-footed. And then there are the issues of toxic personalities and disruptors. All right, let's face it. We are a movement that oftentimes attracts social outcasts. That isn't surprising in our culture, okay? If you're an atheist, you can oftentimes become a social outcast in your community. And if you become an atheist at too young an age, now, not that you become an atheist at too young an age, but you become an outspoken atheist at too young an age in too hostile an environment. And what happens? Nobody will talk to you. And if you do this in middle school, what happens? You don't develop social skills. You don't really fully grow and become a social being, and as a result, you're one of those weirdo adults who is the village atheist and nobody wants to talk to them. And they only gather with other village atheists, and then they sit around and disagree with each other around the library table. All right. There are lots of toxic personalities who have had psychological difficulties. And very often, we try to welcome all the atheists we can because our numbers are so small. And so sometimes we welcome some people who become disruptive of our group. And if you welcome people who are disruptive of your group and then they start to dominate, next thing you know, they're the leader of the group. And then that changes the whole nature of the group. You have to be willing to say no to toxic personalities. There's a whole series of strategies for doing it, but one thing is not to elect them to primary office. Another thing is if you're having meetings in people's homes, the owner of the home has a right to exclude anyone they want from their home. And so it doesn't have to be the club that's excluding the person, it could just be the owner of the home. If someone isn't going to be civil, you have a right to say you are expected to be civil, you are expected not to antagonize other people, because constantly antagonizing other people is harassment. It may not be sexual harassment, but it's harassment. If you bother somebody repeatedly and they tell you to stop and you don't, that's harassment, and you call them on it. Okay, and then you also get infiltrators and trolls. There are fundamentalists who will sometimes check your group out, and they will try to be disruptive by asking all kinds of pesky questions and raising issues and being trouble. You have a right to say, look, this is who we are, and we're trying to create a safe space for folks like us, and you're part of the problem, and we don't want you coming to our meetings. It's your group. You can decide who's part of it and who's not. Okay, and there are management problems. One of them is taking on too few projects. That could lead to stagnation. If you're only doing the same thing over and over again, the group stagnates. People don't want to go to your group anymore. Oh, all they do is this. Okay? Another one is taking on too many projects so that you are so scattered you diffuse your energies and that you're not focused in any particular way. You need to find that balance of a variety of activities that all focus on your mission, but not such a variety that you can't manage it, keep track of it, and it's distracting you. Another problem is lack of structure. Many of us were such free thinkers, we want to have everything free flowing. We don't want to have structures, we don't want to have rules. The rules manage the situation to make it easy for people to do things. There's the old saying, good fences make good neighbors. So it's good to have rules so that you can have boundaries, and boundaries then allow people to know when they're crossing the line or not. You don't know if you're crossing the line if you don't know where the line is. So you establish lines. And you can always vote to change them if it turns out that your drawing of lines is oppressive. Lack of community can be a problem. That you want to create a sense of kind of bonding in your group where people feel part of the group. That it's not just a show they come to.
Your sound went out. Can you check the mic?
Oh, okay, I'll check my light. Is it supposed to be red?
Yeah, well, yeah. It's red when it's on.
Change batteries?
Yeah, it could be the battery.
All right. Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
It's not going to make
Okay, well, then you can give me a different microphone. Meantime, I'll just raise my voice. I have a loud enough voice. You can hear me, can't you? Yeah. Okay.
Come on down.
Okay, so what you want to do in your group to be more effective is you want to develop leadership. So that you have, so that you don't have this insular group that's just led by a few people. Remember, you want to spread this around. So you want to start developing leaders. One way to do that is ask people to do things. Many people are afraid to ask someone to do something for the group because they think that's imposing on them. But when you ask someone to do something, you increase their commitment to the group. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
All right, I'm happy to do it this way. All right. So asking people to do things builds commitment, gets them involved, and it lets you know what they're made of and whether they can be promoted to leadership positions. And ask a variety of people, different age, gender, race, so on. I mean, ask different people, get a variety of people involved in your group and have them doing projects and on committees. Now, studies show that 50% of volunteers will disappoint you in some way. They'll let you down. All right, they will. Expect this. Don't be surprised about it. Don't get upset about it. Just put it in the back of your mind and make it part of your planning and thinking. Don't be railing against people. Don't be saying, oh, this person didn't do their job, oh, everyone's all messed up, you can't trust anybody. No, you can trust people. You can trust half of them. All right? Okay? So, test the waters. Ask people to do things. And if they let you down, you might not want to ask them to do the next thing. And that helps you know who you can rely on the next time around. And so it goes. Rotate people on committees and on the board to keep cultivating new leaders. And develop the concept of shared leadership. Because you have officers, you have the board, you have committees, you have projects. Different people are assigned to head up different things. Different people have different duties, and you share the leadership so that it isn't all on one person. So then what does the president of your group do? Your president doesn't do anything. Your president plans, organizes, and supervises the work of everybody else.
Yeah.
True management does not mean doing. It means getting other people to do. Okay? And that's a job in itself. Trust me. I've been in that role. I've had to get other people to do things. So I've had to deal with those disappointments. It's a full-time job doing nothing. All right? All right. Also, what you want to do is rotate in new people. When you find people come to your group, then try to get them involved after they've been there a while. But don't fall into the trap of you get a whole bunch of new people coming to the group and already you're handing out leadership positions to them. Don't do that. That's embarrassing because that makes your group look like it's not well organized. Let people be in the group a while before you start assuming that they're going to volunteer for some project. Unless someone says, oh, I've been an atheist for 30 years and I know how to do this specialized thing. And if you really need someone to fill that slot, you might make an exception. But the exception proves the rule. Primarily, get people involved in your group and feeling part of your community before you start getting them into leadership roles. And the committees you need to build are a program committee, so you need a chair for that, and that handles meetings and activities. A social committee, this handles greeting new people, providing food, setting up opportunities to mingle. You may want an activist committee to engage in socio-political activities, because some of your people are going to say, I don't want to listen to a lecture, I don't want to just drink up and discuss, I want to go out and be an activist. And they try to get everybody to be an activist, and not everybody wants to or can or has the time. So have an outlet for that. Have an activist committee. Have an internet and promotion committee. There are certain people who are really good at this internet stuff, and they like to do it. Recruit them to manage your website. And someone else might be really good at public relations. Help them to get involved in handling your promotion. And then you need a membership chair and a membership committee. Their job is to engage in the process of attracting and keeping members. On your board of directors, you develop better governance. Now, governance means how you run your board meetings and how you run your organization. Now, the ideal situation is to have a policy board. The board just sets policy but doesn't actually do anything. Policy is handed down to the worker bees who do the work and who head up the committee. But usually in small volunteer organizations, that just isn't realistic. So more often than not, you'll have what's called a working board. A board where each person on the board has a job to do. They not only vote on policy, but they carry out tasks, and specific tasks to specific persons, and then the president oversees all of that. So, give everyone a job on a working board, and then have the president supervise. When it comes to conducting your board meetings, avoid Robert's Rules of Order fetishism. There are lots of people who can disrupt a meeting using Robert's Rules of Order like you wouldn't believe. And I make a motion, I second that motion. Well, look it up in Roberts. Can you do that? Can this kind of motion be done? And so on. There is a provision in Robert's Rules of Order that tells you how to keep from abusing Robert's Rules of Order. Many people don't know about that provision. It's this. If your meeting is 15 or less people, don't follow the strict rules of Robert's Rules of Order, because Robert's Rules of Order are designed for large assemblies. They're based on things like the U.S. House of Representatives, or union meetings, or big political meetings and conventions and things. That's what Robert's Rules of Order were designed for, so that you could carry on a big meeting without chaos and have a room full of people, a whole auditorium full of people, and still keep order. That's what Robert's Rules of Order are. But when you're having a small meeting, then you do not use all of those little things in Robert's Rules of Order. Instead, what you do is you use a consensus system. You discuss things freely, and then you ask people. You ask the whole group, do we have consensus? And if nobody says anything, then you have consensus. But then you ask, is anyone out of consensus? Someone may raise their hand and say, I'm out of consensus. All right, so you let it be noted in a minute that this person or these people are out of consensus with the majority. They don't agree. They're not going to oppose, they just don't agree. Or do you wish to break consensus? You ask, is there anyone who wishes to break consensus? And if the person raises their hand, or more than one person does, then you say, okay, consensus is broken. And then you revert to Robert's Rules of Order, and you settle it with a proper vote. But most of the time in small meetings, you don't have to vote. You already know. So long as everyone is speaking freely, and so long as no one's being shut out of the discussion, and everyone's getting a chance to speak, then you can get your business done. So the consensus system allows you then not to have to put everything to a vote when you already all agree. And it spares you a lot of trouble. So you ask, do we have consensus? Is anyone out of consensus? Does anyone wish to block consensus? And if someone wishes to block consensus, they're not a bad person. They simply want it put to a vote, and they want arguments being presented on both sides, and that can change the outcome. One handy way is if everyone has a name tag bent like a tent. Okay, so you have a name tag with a name on it bent like a tent, like this, okay? Creased on the top. And then when someone wants to speak, instead of them waving their hands like this at a meeting of 8 to 15 people, instead they just stand their name tag up on end. And the chair recognizes them in order of which they were put up, and it's very quiet, and it doesn't involve people going like this like kids do in a classroom trying to get more attention. Have agendas for your meetings. Know what you're meeting about, what the objective of the meeting is. Plan it to be a short agenda, and plan to get specific business done and stick to the agenda and finish on time so that people don't stop coming to board meetings because there are these marathon things that go long into the night in which you engage in philosophical discussion half the time. No, get together, do your business, finish it, and leave. And keep the size of your board or your committee between 5 and 15 with people, with the ideal or the optimum being 8. 8's a good number. All right. You want to build an intentional community in your group if you want to grow. Now, not every group wants to grow, and that's okay. But if you want your group to grow, it's good if you build an intentional community. So remember, people will leave. Newcomers will leave if they don't make 6 friends in 6 months. So build a community where people actually make new friends. Greet newcomers immediately. And everyone can be a greeter, but make sure that you don't have somebody wander in and then nobody talks to them. Continually ask yourself and each other how attractive your group is to other people coming in the door, how attractive your meetings are, how attractive your setting is. Now, one of the features of community isn't a God of the gaps, but a church of the gaps. You see, one of the reasons why churches are so successful is not because they offer the God answer for all of the gaps in their knowledge. It's because they offer a social solution to the gaps in public social services. And this gets to this big question of, why is it that there are so many people who don't believe in God when in the past there were? And the answer is, to the degree that societies provide for the needs of people, such as in European societies, so long as societies take care of people's medical needs and social needs and so on, they have less and less need for religion, and they give up religion. And it has nothing to do about a bunch of atheists and freethinkers and groups and activists out there hustling our philosophy. It has to do with social changes. When people's needs are being met, they don't need religion. When people are suffering, they oftentimes turn to religion. And they sometimes turn to the church of the gaps that will fill in the missing spaces where government social service breaks down. And that's why people in church rally together and help one another. Well, there are atheists in need. There are humanists in need. And you can come together for them. You can build a community so where somebody visits the sick. Think of that. Atheists, humanists, and freethinkers visiting the sick. Because what happens if you don't? Well, they're going to be visited only by their families, and their families may not be sympathetic to their view. Or they're going to be visited by the hostile chaplain, and not anyone who agrees with it. So they're sitting there, convalescing, trying to get well, and all of these people are kind of pushing religion on them and using their ailment as an opportunity, as a mission opportunity, to get under their skins when they're in a weakened condition. That's when they need you. So you need to fill in the gaps. You need to build a community where you're actually meeting the individual needs of your members. So provide fellowship and support. Now, a lot of your new members are going to be angry come-outers, people who have been burned by religion and who have good reason to be angry, okay? But you don't want them to stay there forever. You want to give them a place to talk about this stuff. They need to talk about it. They need to ventilate, and they need to tell all sorts of anti-religious jokes, okay? That's part of it. That's how you get over this stuff, is you make fun of religion, you poke fun, you do all of these outrageous things, you have all of this kind of fun, and you say all of these things. There are lots of angry people who are coming to our movement, and they are okay, all right? They are not necessarily toxic personalities. They've just been burned, and they need to talk to other people who've been burned. Create a subgroup if you can, or meet them and greet them and let them feel welcome and accept their anger as legitimate. Accept their pain, and at the same time, don't let it end there. Give them opportunities for other outlets so that they can also do something positive. But don't rush them into it, because they're not all ready to do something positive. They're angry, and you can't just say, get over it. All right? You just can't say, well, that's not what we're about. You know, you need to drop that. We want to have a positive outlook. Well, that's fine. Your group can have a primary positive mission. And you're going to attract some people who are hurting. The walking wounded, as the late Rabbi Sherwin Wine of the Society for Humanistic Judaism argued. So you will get the walking wounded. So you need to be there to help them. Gently support them. Have a really good membership chair who works with all of these things. Then run tight meetings. Have your program start on time, end on time, with a social gathering included. And that social time is critical. Build a nurturing, supportive community, not just a warehouse for toxic personalities. And that means you have to have someone in charge of the discussion of your meetings who manages that discussion well and doesn't do it necessarily with an iron hand, but certainly knows how to handle difficult people. There's lots more I can say about that, but we do attract many asocial personalities, and so just don't let them destroy the group. But that doesn't mean they can't be a member if they behave themselves. Pick meeting rooms that are light and cheery, not dark and gloomy. The way you look to others and outsiders is important. Meeting rooms should be sized so they are filled between 60 to 75%. If you end up getting wall-to-wall people, well, that makes you look even better. But people start getting uncomfortable if the room is too full. Sometimes they like to have space between each other. They don't all like to sit together, or they like to have a chair to put their purse on, or whatever. So people don't always want to be forced into too much cozy. Personally ask people to come to meetings. Call them up or email them and ask them to come to meetings. That will double your attendance. Only do the technology at your meetings that you can master. All right? Don't say, oh boy, everybody does technology, so we want to do technology. There are two groups, and I've made a comment about this earlier. You might have heard me shout it out, why is it that atheists don't know how to do technology? Well, there are two groups that are really good at new technology. And those are evangelical preachers and pornographers. Those are the two groups that really are the first to master a technology. Now, keep in mind that they all have a lot of money behind them, so they can hire tech specialists to make sure everything runs right. And that's why they do it better than we do, not because they're smart, but because they have more money and they set aside a tech person. And we need to think in terms of that as a worthwhile goal for your group, is to have a tech person who's in charge of this. But start by only using the technology you can master. Assign responsibility for technology to someone who you can depend on, and make sure they continue to be dependent. Before a meeting, test your technology. How many times have you gotten to a meeting and somebody starts talking and then they're setting up the projector during the discussion? All right, that projector should already be set up, that sound or whatever, that video should already be set up and tested to where you know it's going to work. I've seen how the professionals operate, and if there's a professional speaker who's really good at what they do, and they're putting on a big talk, a big humanist or atheist conference, they like to test their technology beforehand and make sure the people they're working with know what they're doing so they don't have any goof-ups during their presentation. So test your test before the meeting and make sure everything is set up. So allow extra time for setup. All right, run quality meetings. Have challenging meetings, not just meetings where you breathe your own exhaust and everyone learning how right you are. All right, we know we're right, okay? But we can talk about something else once in a while. Have a balance of speakers, styles, genders, ethnicities. Speak about the inner life as well as external issues. Speak about relationships, have social dimensions, global dimensions. We're oftentimes so airy about our philosophy that we don't realize that we have a philosophy that's good for families. So let's talk about family issues. Let's talk about relationships, not just talking about abstractions. There's this old joke about humanists that they love humanity. It's just people they can't stand. We're great in the abstract, all right? But we need to get down and get personal. That's where the churches have us beat all to hell. We can do it too. There is nothing specifically theistic about building community and liking people and making people feel welcome and having a social dimension and having family activities and having child care and so on. The churches don't need to have a monopoly on that. There's nothing particularly godly about that. In fact, it's very human and very evolutionary.
Here, here.
All right, now for my final remarks, I'm going to talk to you about some of the kinds of meetings that you can have. Now, I mentioned Darwin Day, you can have a summer picnic. In fact, if you have a local coalition, a summer picnic is a way to get the various types of people together, intergenerational families, different types of groups and styles, all mixing and knowing about each other. Honor the Day of Reason. Solstice parties are really good. Human life or Festivus or however you want to celebrate it. Have feel-good things. Everything doesn't have to be intellectually weighted down. We don't have to be so left-brained that our heads is all tilt this way. And everything doesn't have to be the kind of meeting where we spend a lot of time sitting down. So we can have active endeavors. All right, then the last things here are that you need to really promote your group. And among the ways to promote group are to do publicity stunts. Get attention. Do things that are surprising. Not necessarily offensive, but surprising and different. For example, many campus groups are very creative. If you connect yourself with a campus group, you'll find these students are really creative. They've come up with this fiction for fiction book exchange. That if you hand in your Bible, they'll give you your choice of a book of fiction in return because it's fiction for fiction. All right? Now, some of them like to do what they call porn for porn, and they'll say that if you give in your Bible, they'll give you a porn book because they think the Bible is porn. But I got to tell you, I've read the Bible from cover to cover. You've read the Bible from cover to cover. There's no porn in there. It is bloody disappointing. I've been promised all of my atheists for going on back in the 19th century. They've been promising me salacious literature. And I've been reading the Bible and I haven't found it. The Song of Solomon? Oh, what the heck. The Song of Solomon, that's love poetry with a little sex thrown in. Come on, it's hardly even erotica. No, I'm sorry, the Bible is not pornographic. But it's fictional. So you can do fiction for fiction. Now you've got some members in your group that are really into social media. They're into Facebook, they're into Twitter, they're into all of this stuff. Recruit them and use them to promote your meetings and your gatherings and your activities and your ideas because they're really good at this and they love to do it. You may think that, you know, that social media is a time sink. It's okay if you think that. But there are people who love this stuff. And they do it all day. They even do it when they're driving, which is dangerous, but they do it. So recruit these people to publicize your activities. And finally, I have some talking points that I'm going to pass out to you. These are the ones that I use for the United Coalition of Freethought, for all of our local coalitions when they launch with their big billboard. And the talking points are ones that very often you can use because they, in many other contexts. So I'll let you pass these out, but I'll share with you what they are. The primary message you often want to get across, it may not be the only thing you want to do with your promotion, but the primary message you want to get across is you aren't alone. You're not the only one. There are many people who think like you. So many of us think, oh, I thought I was the only one. I still get communications from people who say, I thought I was the only atheist. I didn't know there were others who kind of wonder, where have you been? But don't chide them for it. Just let them know that they're not alone. That our primary effort, and this is what you get when people say you're attacking my religion, you say, look, our primary effort is to reach out to folks like us and let them know we exist. We're gathering people together, like ourselves. Just as the churches do. They gather people together. We gather our own together. You can be like us. We can get together. And that you let them know that all non-theistic groups are not alike, so if the group they get into isn't right for them, there are other groups to choose from. You have non-theistic neighbors. Isn't that one of the points that the gay rights movement made? That we're everywhere. We're your friends, your neighbors, your family members, your co-workers. We're everywhere. That was the gay rights movement. Well, that's our message too. We're everywhere. All right? So, you could be sitting next to one of us in church and not even know it. Because you sit on a bus stop, let's say, and you sit down next to someone. What's the assumption? What's the assumption you make about them and the assumption they make about you? The assumption is that you all believe in God. You assume the person you sit next to believes in God, and they're certainly assuming that about you because that's the dominant view in our culture. So you have to let them know that you are not godly, and then they'll find out that you may find out that people you know and live next door to, they're ungodly too. So you can get together. And so you have non-theistic neighbors. We need to be more out and about. And finally, the message needs to be that that the public response to our message has been positive. So many people think that by putting ourselves out there, we're going to get attacked, that we're somehow gluttons for punishment, that we are masochistic, that we're getting our message out there because we really want people to beat up on us. No. Most of the time, most of the reaction we get is positive. People say, where have you been all my life? That's the reaction we get, and it feels good. And you want to tell the media that. You want to tell the public. And you want to say, we're not attacking anyone. If you're not. I mean, if you're not attacking anyone, you can say, we're not attacking anyone. We're just saying, hey, we're over here. And in order to find our audience, we have to let everybody hear our message. because we don't all live in atheist neighborhoods like some people live in Catholic neighborhoods, all right? So we can't just send out a direct mail flyer to all of these atheist neighborhoods and just deal with our own. We're not easy to find. We don't all look alike. We don't all act alike. I mean, sometimes I can spot, you know, like once I was driving up, I was looking for the atheist meeting, and yeah, there it is. You know, and so sometimes you can tell, you know, they've got all those bumper stickers on their cars. But most of the time you can't tell. We're just ordinary people. And that's why the Freedom from Religion Foundation has this kind of thing. This is what an atheist looks like. And they'll have a picture of someone, or they'll have a t-shirt that says this is what an atheist looks like. Just like the feminists did, but this is what a feminist looks like. To kind of normalize our image, to mainstream our image, to let people know that we exist. So, these are some the talking points that I use for all of the campaigns in United for. They won't be the talking points you'll use all the time, but you may want to use them some of the time. So they're there for you. So those are my main points. And I just want to take a few questions from any of you that you may have, or anything you want me to address that I might have skipped past, and then we can be done. Yes?
We've had a small little bank account, but we don't want to do the whole 501c3 stuff.
Yeah.
Are we in need of doing federal tax returns and stuff like that, or are we okay with it small?
Well, there is a federal tax law that says if your operation doesn't earn above a certain amount of money, you don't have to report anything. And if you're a nonprofit, that you don't have to report anything. So there
Even
is.
if you're not a 501c3?
Well, you see, now this is an interesting thing. This is where the tax laws actually favor churches slightly. And that is, if you say you're a religious organization, that you don't even have to apply for tax exemption until you get to a certain point. Now, you may not want to do that, however. Another way to do it is that it's just somebody's personal bank account, and they pay taxes on it, and you raise the money to help them pay the taxes on it. But at a certain point, you're going to need to take out a business license. You're going to need to have a bank, especially if you're going to have a bank account in your group's name. And then at some point, you're going to have to deal with the tax question. And it may just be you decide to have your group pay taxes. You know, you may decide that it isn't worth the trouble to go for 501c3 status because it's a lot of work. But once you start getting up there, then you will want to go for that, and you will want to find someone in your group who has experience with that. Or attach yourself to a larger group in your area and become a subordinate of them and operate under their tax exemption. Those are some of the ways you do it. So you have to look at your own needs. And if you're ever going to buy real estate, you absolutely need all of that stuff that you need to incorporate and everything else. So it depends on where you are in your growth or how far you want to go. Yes?
I noticed that some of the coalitions in the United States are statewide, in New Jersey and Colorado.
Yeah.
Can you comment on the effectiveness of those as opposed to ones that are just in a metro area?
Yeah, we prefer to organize around metro areas because we organize around media markets, and there isn't really a state media market. The media markets tend to be localized, so that's the way we prefer to organize. But some of the coalitions, for separate reasons in each case, are statewide. A couple of them had already formed before we brought them into our network, and they formed on a statewide basis, and there wasn't anything we could do about it. In the case of New Jersey, well, they certainly didn't want to be Newark Core, and they didn't want to be identified with some other city. And a lot of the cities in New Jersey get identified with other cities nearby, like New York City and Philadelphia. And so, what city identifies New Jersey? And the New Jersey groups were scattered all over, so I kind of made an exception in their case because they insisted on it. Of course, Rhode Island is one media market, so that one was easy. So there are several reasons for that, but our primary goal is to organize around media markets, and so we prefer a city focus or a small region. All right, any other questions? Yes.
Well, this kind of goes with his, here in Nebraska, where most of our population is in two cities that are on the very east, there's a lot of us that live out in the rural area in the west. Our media market may be out there, but we aren't got enough roots for making a coalition. Would we just come in and say, oh, we get an Omaha coalition? Is that acceptable to bring these rural markets that are
Yeah, very often what we do is we'll have, like on the website of the coalition, we'll have groups that are participants in the coalition. We don't always call them members, we just say participants in the coalition. And then you draw a horizontal line below that, you say friends of the coalition. And that's where you mention all these other groups that are sort of scattered around, not quite in the media market or not in it at all, but they still want to affiliate with the coalition. There's no rule against it. And you can do it. If the coalition will have you and you want to be part of it, and you're not going to be able to be part of anything else, by all means get listed. It can't hurt you. People may find you. People may read about the publicity elsewhere in the state. Go to the website, find your group. It's good for you, and it doesn't hurt anybody else. So by all means. Yeah.
We've all talked about presidents, board members, working groups. How many hats is too many for a person to wear in your group?
More than one. But very often people do wear more than one hat. But a lot of it has to do with, do you feel too pressured? Are you running out of time to do all this thing? Are you not, is it hurting your family life? Is it hurting your work life? That's how you know what you're learning. On the other hand, if you're retired and you have nothing to do with your time and you want to be part of all of these committees and you love it to death and everyone loves the work you're doing, yeah, keep doing it. That's the standard. See how loose and easy breezy I am? Yeah, that's my humor. Yeah.
Just a suggested book. It's not about atheism, but about science, about communicating science. It's called Don't Be Such a Scientist, by Randy Olson. And I think it's a great point about we need to find that balance between communicating facts and communicating effectively. It's something that Stephen Schneider mentioned in the Science and Context course. How do we communicate effectively factual information to this community of people, our culture that is so self-absorbed and also completely distracted by a bajillion different messages at the same time. So I think it's a really effective book for anyone who's trying to communicate a message in the midst of this very busy media world. I would just recommend it.
Well, thank you for recommending it. I do give a seminar on media work and how to communicate more effectively, so that's a different seminar. But thank you for making that suggestion, because yes, you can even in your groups form a committee for how can we phrase things better, how can we communicate better. Like when someone says, oh, atheism is just a belief. Then some people get together and they discuss that and they say, no, atheism isn't a belief, it's a conclusion. The group came up with that, and that's a nice little quip. But people do that because they discuss it. Go on. Okay, yes.
One of the challenges that we're having, I guess, with our challenges I perceive is that we're a newer group. We actually have some draft bylaws together. But right now, we're just suing and free thinkers. We're casting a pretty wide net with atheism, skepticism, that type of thing. And it seems to me like we may be turning off potential members because we're trying to do too much, or we're not meeting this specific niche's needs because we're just trying to do too much.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, we are fairly small. We have over 100 people now in our meetup.com group, about 20, 30 people that come depending on what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if should we actually end up having two organizations, or is it one organization with like kind of like these departments underneath it? We have a Department of Atheism and a Department of Skepticism, and we kind of structure ourselves that way.
Well, first of all, you need to have a meeting of your leaders and come up with a mission statement. That's your purpose.
And we have that.
Okay.
Pretty broad.
All right. You might want to define it and tighten it a little. And then, that's an important discussion to have internally. Because one of the things that happens is that you split up into two groups, there's a each group grows. And you get twice as many people when you have twice as many groups. So that isn't a bad thing. If instead you're going to break up into subgroups that stay in one group, then you got to make sure that those subgroups publicize their activities effectively and almost have independent media existence so that they can attract more people. And you need to set up a system for managing that so it doesn't get out of hand.
Right, so like Susan and Free Thinkers could be almost like a parent organization, but really what goes out into the public and what we say is, I'm a member of Susan Atheists, or I'm a member of Susan Skeptics, or maybe I'm a member of both, but really the parent company is kind of in the background. That parent company doesn't really get publicized or
Well, there's a group in the Washington DC area called Washington Area Secular Humanists. And they just started out as being one group in the Washington DC area. But then another group said, well, in Northern Virginia wanted to start meeting, and another group in Baltimore wanted to start meeting. And they all became part of Washington Area Secular Humanists, so WASH for short. And so then they decided, all right, we'll have this overriding group called WASH, and then we'll have these subordinate groups that have separate meetings. So they have one board for Washington Area Secular Humanists, but they have separate meetings at all these places, and now they've stretched all the way into Virginia, down to Richmond, and all the way in Maryland, all the way up to Frederick, almost to the Pennsylvania border. So they're still called Washington Area Secular Humanists, but they cover 2 states in the District of Columbia, and it's still one group. So you can do that, provided each separate entity has a reason for existing, and you have a system for managing.
Is that one group, one bank account, and one board?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but with separate meetings and gatherings. And they don't have to, and then local leaders, one leader is appointed for each subgroup, but they don't have a separate board for each subgroup. And that's the way they do it. Yes?
I'm in the same group. My wife and I live in Brookings, South Dakota, which is an hour north of Sioux Falls, where the group is headquartered. You gave a lot of stats about 50% of the people are going to let you down. Yeah, when you ask them to do something. Do you have any stats on how far is too far to ask someone to drive? How many times can you ask someone to drive an hour? How many times a month?
If you live in rural areas where people are used to driving 30 miles to 50 miles just to go to the doctor, you can ask them to drive longer to get places because they're used to doing that anyway. Whereas in the city, sometimes you can't get them to go from one end of town to the other without a good reason. So that's too far. I'm not going to go to the other end of Houston just to go to a meeting. So, and Houston's a big town, it'll take you an hour to get from one end to the other. So that depends. And then some states are very small, but if you meet north of a particular place, you may as well be in another country. So you have to look at your individual thing. I can't give you a mileage chart and say this is too far. You have to see what your audience will put up with, and you do that by asking. All right, well, I don't have time for any more questions because we're going to all have to get out of this room, but thank you very much.